Okay, YouTube, so we're back. It's the next day. It got kind of late as I was hooking up that junction box and figuring out my routing last night. Okay, so the first thing I did yesterday was I did have a busted taillight lens. This is the taillight lens. We've got that all replaced, so that part of the job is taken care of. So the next thing I did was I did get the junction box mounted. That allows me to store my plug here. In this new bracket that we added yesterday, or when it's not in storage, I can unwrap it like this and plug it right into my vehicle. Okay, so coming underneath the trailer, you can see I was able to get these wires back out, which is good. Here, I'm not going to use these wires to actually connect the electrical connections. However, I am going to use those to fish new wires up through the trailer. Here's the junction box, fully mounted, and I'm ready to fish those wires up. I just used a little bit more of that brown duct tape and just taped my new wiring harness to the wires that were already coming through the hole, and then I'll feed it up through the hole and put the grommet in, and that'll allow me to connect directly to the wires in the trailer. Okay, many of you may not have to do this step of fishing the wires like I am. Many of you will just have an open enclosed trailer on the inside, but as you can see, I have this wood paneling up and my wire is actually hidden behind it. So I'm just gonna pull it through now. And there's my duct tape and the abrasion cloth. You can hear it dragging when it comes up, so that's part of the reason why we like to add that cloth, just to make sure it doesn't snag on anything. Now we can look at disconnecting these existing trailer lights and reconnecting them to our new harness down to the junction box. Then we'll be ready to attack that reverse light relay, and we can test everything and make sure it all works. Back under the trailer one more time. You can see I've got all my wiring hooked up and color coded. I went ahead and installed that grommet that we talked about right here. So that wire will be protected. And the last thing to do to finish up underneath here is go ahead and put the cover back on. And I'll tighten these screws. And there you have it. The cover is back on, and this part of the project is now finished. Well, I'm ready to start my wiring, and this can be a little confusing because since I had a 4-pin trailer connector before, and I'm going to a 7-pin, the colors don't actually match. So it's not green to green, brown to brown, yellow to yellow. Because it can be a little confusing, I made myself a little cheat sheet here of what the 4-pin trailer light wires were and the new 7-pin trailer light wires. So that way I know which colors to connect to which, since I'm not running my wiring all the way to the lights and I'm going to reuse the existing wiring that I have. And I'm just going to be making connections up here for everything except for the reverse lights. So according to my cheat sheet, the very first thing that I need to do is connect my green in my new 7-pin wire harness to the brown of my old 4-pin harness. And that's for my tail lights. I'm actually making a little cut in this abrasion cloth. I don't want to cut it all the way off because I do have some wiring that's going to run to another place. But what I'll do is feed the wiring that I need to connect up here in the top up through this hole Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to put a zip tie right at the back of that incision just to make sure that that abrasion cloth doesn't open up any more than what I want it to. You can see there we got the green wire out. I made a little trim there. Now the next two wires are going to be the red, which is the left turn and brake, and the brown, which is the right turn and brake. Okay. So now you can see I have the three out of there. We're gonna set those off to the side for a second. And then with the yellow wire, I'm gonna add another zip tie up on the opposite end of that incision, just to make sure that it stays. Just like that. Okay, so as I said, the first connection we need to make is this green wire to the brown wire. Here, I'm going to move you in just a little bit closer, give you a better view. Okay, so there's a yellow brown, right? And there's a green brown. And both of these browns, each one controls the taillights on each side. So those need to actually be tied together for a 7-pin harness and connected, both of them, to this green wire. And as I'm looking here, I see a couple things like this wire nut that I'm not real happy with. There's this was already scabbed in here. So I'm going to try to eliminate some of those issues, or some of those things that I'm not real fond of, and try to reduce some of these connections so we have less failure points in the future. First, I'm going to get rid of this wire nut. Wire nuts are great for electrical in your house, but not, and maybe a short term on your vehicle, but definitely not a permanent fix. Moisture gets in there and will corrode the wires, and then you just end up with bad connections, and you're always chasing what the issue could be. So these are all brown wire connections that we're looking at here. So we're going to split this wire, so we just have the brown wire. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this blue wire, which was an extension wire, off of the green brown. Okay. I'm going to tie it to the brown off the yellow brown. I'm going to connect that to this blue, which runs my running lights down the sides of the trailer, and then connect it to this green wire. And I'm going to do that by tying two wires together on one side, two wires on the other side, and then I'm going to feed both of those into a butt connector So whenever you're trying to join multiple wires like this in a butt connector, you want to strip off more wire than you would for just a typical end connector to give you room to twist the wires together before placing it in the butt connector. Now you can solder these, and a lot of people like to do that. My opinion on soldering, I used to solder my joints, and someone once told me that that wasn't necessarily a great idea on a vehicle, because when you solder the joint in a vehicle and there's a lot of vibration, that solid joint is prone to crack. And even though the connection is good, when the solder won't break, the vibration will actually cause the wire to break right behind the solder. So I try to avoid that. So I got these all twisted together on this side. Now I'll trim it back to where it's at a good length for me to get the good crimp on it. But I never want to do that until I have them twisted together. You can see that fits in there nicely. Crimp it down, and that'll be a good solid connection. There we go. So hopefully you can see that. Now we're going to do this blue wire here along with our green wire. So I'm going to give myself some extra on this green wire, strip it back. Also, just to point out, there is already a lot of corrosion in this where that wire nut was. I'm going to cut that corroded wire off, and I want to re-strip those just to make sure that we're getting nice copper solid connection. Because that corrosion will actually feed back into the wire sheathing itself, and you won't see it, but it will create a poor connection. Okay, twist the two together. Now that we got the green wire out of the way, The next one would be our red wire. And the red wire is our left turn and brake. So that goes to our yellow wire in our 4-pin harness. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing there. Just use a butt connector. There we go. That's a good connection. And then the final should be our blue wire. There. Now all of those connections are good. We use a couple zip ties. I tie all of those together just to make it a little neater. Okay, and now I'm just going to kind of tuck that right back down just like that. That's it for our tail lights, brake lights, and turn signals. Here you can see the in and the out. The inside, this is my wire running in through the floor, runs up to the inside. It's just a spade connection, which is really nice. And then my out is also a spade connection. And then that runs up into my battery box and connects to my battery to keep from backfeeding from my battery back to my tow vehicle. So that way it only charges when my alternator is running and the lights on the plug don't light up when it's not connected to the tow vehicle. All right, real quick before we get back to turning wrenches, I'm going to talk about something a little more important. But I'm really hoping that I'll be able to speak some words that give you some support, because we all need support through life. So, you know, thinking about working on these trailer lights, we've all been there with trailer lights. You hit the brake, left blinker starts flashing like you're headed to a disco. You check the plug, smack it a couple times because that always helps, right? And somehow it just gets worse. At that point, you realize it's not the truck, it's the wiring. And that's kind of how our faith works too. We're connected to Jesus, but when life hits the brakes, the wrong signal comes out. Stress flips the anger switch. Someone pushes our buttons and suddenly the patience light is completely burnt out. Paul talks about that in Romans 12:2. He says, "Do not conform any longer to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That's God talk for rewiring. God isn't just trying to make us look better. He's fixing what's crossed inside. And just like trailer wiring, you can't fix it by wrapping it with tape and praying somebody doesn't notice it. Psalm 139:23 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts." You know, that speaks volumes. When God searches our heart, he can find the problem right away. But we have to bring it to him first. You know, also, trailer lights don't work without a good ground. No ground, no lights. Jesus said in John 15:5, "I am the vine, You are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So if your spiritual blinkers acting up, don't ignore it. Let God rewire you. Because when he does, all the signals are clear. Let's pray. Lord, search our hearts, fix what's crossed, ground us in you, and help our lives shine clearly for others. Amen. Now let's get back to work and get these lights rewired. Now it's time to work on the reverse lights. Here's the location of my battery box, and if we follow these wires up, you can see I have a shelf here that you see me working above before, and here's the location of my switch panel on the front of that shelf. This is where we need to connect the relay to. This switch controls my voltmeter and some USB plugs and a cigarette lighter plug for auxiliary power. And I'm able to monitor my power right there through the voltmeter as I'm using my lights. This switch operates my side floodlight, and the lower switch operates my rear spotlights, which is what I'm going to use for my backup lights. So we need to connect our wiring from that switch to the relay to be able to operate those lights when the vehicle's in reverse, even when the power is off on the switch. So that's what we're going to do now. So since my battery box is right here in the nose of the trailer, and I've already run down the wire for the reverse light from my junction box, and I've got this little fuse block right here. I can tap into my power there, and you can see running those wires right around, we could tap right into our switch panel here. I think the best spot to put that relay somewhere in this area here. This is a single pole double throw relay. We're going to use all 4 pins on the outside, but not the center pin. This is going to allow us to toggle power between our switch and our reverse lights from the tow vehicle. So let's get this mounted. This is pretty easy. It's just one screw, and being that I have this paneling inside here and 2x4 framing, it's pretty easy for me to run a screw pretty much anywhere that I need one. So that'll be good right there. And now I have easy access to run my wires over to the switch and back down to this fuse block. So the first wire I want to run is I want to run my power to this fuse block. I know that I have power right here, and that is controlled by a 15 amp fuse, and that will protect the circuit if something were to happen. So being that that is a hot wire, which will be our power all the time, we'll use red. This is a 14 gauge primary wire. Now I made myself a little cheat sheet that tells me where my wires need to go, so that way I don't get anything crossed. Sometimes these relays can be a little confusing on which wire needs to go where, but my constant power or power from the battery needs to go to the 30 post. So now I can connect back to this number 30 and then right over to that power post. Now, because I have the power wire run already, I'm going to go ahead and pull this fuse out. That will ensure that I don't have any more power running into the relay. No chance that I can short something out. And then once we're all done, then I'll go ahead and slip this fuse back in. The next wire is going to be my power out to the lights. This was in my old harness. This was a blue wire, and it was hooked up to the middle of my switch with a female spade connection. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to connect back to that same connector. I'm going to use a male spade terminal, so that way I can feed right into that and come right back to my relay. And then I don't have to unwrap all of my wires that have already been run up here. I can leave those in place and just add a little extra length of wire. So I know this may be kind of hard to see, but there you can see there is a male terminal end inside that sleeve, and that was what will connect to our female spade connection up at the switch. So here's what that connection looks like. I did add just a little bit of heat shrink onto the this other wire where I took that cover off. You can see these clear plastic covers, just because that connection end actually starts up a little bit higher up here where my fingertip is. And so I didn't want to risk that touching anything. I don't think it would short out. There's not anything grounded in this area, but just to give it a little added protection, I went ahead and put some heat shrink on there. And so that's what that looks like. Now we're going to run this wire back along my harness here, all the way back to the relay. And again, this is just some blue 14 gauge wire left over from when we wired up the junction box. And the reason I'm using blue wire here, even though it doesn't match the junction box harness, the power wire that heads to my lights is a blue wire. So this will allow me to keep that same consistency. If I have to troubleshoot anything in the future, I'll know what color wire I'm looking at. So now that we've got our blue wire hooked up on this end, we're going to run some zip ties and just tie it up to our harness. And I left some extra length on here. This is actually going to connect into our reverse signal light from our tow vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up, and then we'll get those connected together. Okay, now that this is over here, I left all of my zip ties loose because I do need to run a wire from the center terminal there back alongside my blue wire to hook into the relay. So before we connect the blue wire to the yellow wire and hook it up to the relay, let's go ahead and run the switch wire back because that connects directly to the relay. For your switch wire, you could really use any color wire, just like any of the other terminals. For me, again, because I still have red wire left and it's only going between the switch itself for power and the relay, I'm just going to continue to use the red there. That makes the most sense to me as far as what the power is, because this would be the power out from the switch that engages the relay to turn on the lights. Like I said before, I've learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot. I am by no means an expert with wiring, but I'm getting better every day. I believe. So I'm pretty happy with what I've done and what I've learned throughout the years, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. I'm going to feed this wire back through these zip ties that I already put up here. All the way over, and we're going to connect to that middle terminal that we looked at on the switch. And here you can see that red wire connected to the middle terminal and our blue wire coming back out. So now all I got to do is tighten up my zip ties, trim them off, and that's all of the wiring to the switch panel that we need. Okay, and according to my cheat sheet, the switch goes to 86. It's here on the right. Get that blue wire out of the way. Okay. Get rid of that extra yellow wire. Okay. Now that we have the yellow wire, we want to hook up that other diode. So this is going to connect to the in side of the diode. And then we'll take another section of this yellow wire that we just cut the excess off of, and we'll connect into the outside of that diode. There we go. A couple zip ties to hold that in place. Okay, now we got to connect this yellow wire to the blue wire, and then we connect that to the relay. Now when I tie two wires together like this, one of the things that I like to do is I like to go ahead and put a piece of heat shrink on it to help hold those, so it's not just the connection itself holding them together in the wire fitting. I think that just helps hold that connection together a little bit better. Okay, and with the heat shrink on, power to the light and the reverse lead from the tow vehicle should go to terminal 87 on the relay. Okay, now the last thing we got to run is a ground. So I think I'm going to, as much as I don't like the T-taps, I think this is one place where it makes a lot of sense to run a T-tap straight into one of the existing ground wires. And it's one less connection direct to the battery for when I do have to change the battery. So I've connected my black wire here, my ground, to terminal 85. I've run down to my T-tap where I've found my other ground. And now I'm just going to crush those together. Make sure we get a good solid connection. It's pretty easy. They'll end up clicking when they're together. And I always like to give it just a second little press in the center with my pliers to make sure that little barb actually cuts through the insulation. And then we're done. So here's some more close-ups of our connections. There is our red wire connected to the center of the back of our switch. And then our blue wire that connected into our blue wire out to our lights. Okay, and then we run that across here. Here is our yellow wire that comes from our junction box, which is our reverse light signal from the tow vehicle. And it's running down through the diode. On the inside, for the outside, we connect out. And that wire is tied together with our blue harness out to our lights. And then our red switch wire connects here, our ground. And then on the back side, this other red wire is the red wire that we ran right to our fuse panel. And if we follow this down, we'll see the ground wire where we added the T-tap, which runs right down into the battery box. So now we just need to put that fuse back in and go check out our work and see how everything went. Well, we've wrapped up the project on the trailer lights. Let's see how we did and make sure that all of our wiring worked out and all of our fixes are in place. First, we'll check the floodlights off the toggle switch. There's the side light, and there's the back lights. Now, let's check and see if our tail lights work and our reverse lights when we're hooked up to the tow vehicle. All of my running lights look good. No brake lights are on. This is the new tail light lens that I replaced. But as far as running lights, those look good. My brake lights, while working, it looks like this one is not getting as bright, but I know why that is. The bulb itself, which is a double filament bulb, is only running on the running light. So my brake lights are working, which is good. I do need to change that bulb. Left turn signals clearly working. Okay, so again, that comes back to this bulb. I think might have to do a little bit more troubleshooting. The turn signal on the vehicle is working, but not the passenger side rear turn signal. And here we can see our reverse lights are working as they should with no issues. The toggle switch is off inside the trailer. I would call this project a success. Yeah, I'll see you guys on the next video where we're going to take a look at my Model A truck called Maddox. Yeah, I hope you'll join me for that. It's a really exciting project, and we're just getting ready to get started on it. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. If you guys enjoyed the content, please hit like, hit subscribe. I know it's a little thing, but it does help me out a lot. I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.